my charger.
Wait, really?
Yeah. I assume per last means.
Okay, I'm gonna grab the stool.
I like how we're going
We're gonna, sorry.
That's okay. Don't worry about
We're gonna be cleaning the SC2.
No, you will not.
No, but
you
some
won't.
people are
Not
supposed to go to
that
TOC.
Okay, that was one team. Okay,
Oh.
one team. They're not even that good, and
Which
they
team?
make me mad.
which team?
Bentley BS. They're not that.
Wait, what event are you doing?
So we're doing Charlie Open and I'm doing. Where's the phone? Oh, can I use a timer?
Okay.
I mean, well, the phone doesn't work.
Actually, I don't know my phone.
You might want to borrow somebody else's phone.
That's cute.
We
It's actually a
five,
lot more easier.
7.
It's a lot easier.
All right,
to
77775.
Okay.
Yeah, so normally.
Am I? Sorry. I don't know.
Okay, thanks. All right. All right. So is the judge ready? Partner? Okay. Time starts now. As the first speaker of the affirmative team, I strongly affirm today's resolution. The end of the Cuban embargo will do more harm than good. So we define this resolution as the Valley Resolution. Definitions are contextual. Ending the Cuban embargo. We're going to be lifting the trade ban in Cuba, and what we're saying is going to do more harm than good. Okay, the first contention is that of perception. So according to Human Rights Watch, the Cuban government has often arrest human rights defenders and independent journalists, and this has actually increased over the years, even before when the Cuban embargo started, and before that too. What we see here, the Cuban government has a really horrible record when it comes to human rights, often suppressing the voices of individuals who are just demanding better changes in equality for the people, as well as arresting people just for simply standing up against the regime. And this is one of the biggest reasons, because what we must understand is that once we end the Cuban embargo, the U.S. is giving this perception to the Cuban regime is that we want to be friends with you now. We're okay with what you're doing and we approve of it. And this is not something the USA wants to be doing because, one, it goes against our fundamental values that all humans deserve rights such as freedom of speech and the freedom to express their opinions. And two, we're not just sending this message to the Cuban government and, more importantly, the regime there. We're sending this message to the rest of the world that we approve of the human rights abuses in Cuba, and we are willing to let that slide. And the fact is, the Cuban government has done nothing to change the human rights abuses that have been reported by humanrightswatch.org, and this has actually increased over the years. So what we see here is the impact is that if we were to end the embargo, this would lead to more dehumanization of people, or because they're getting this perception that we'd approve of it. Yeah.
So when you say it's been increasing over the years, like,
Yeah.
okay,
It's actually
That's
been
exact-
increasing over the years, the amount of abuses. Okay, so addressing the second contention, which is that of the election cycle. So currently in the status quo, 50% of Cuban American voters, over 50% of Cuban American voters support the Cuban embargo, specifically older voters. And we have actually seen this come to play when it comes to key states like Florida. So that currently all of the Democratic candidates do not support the Cuban embargo, which leads many of these Cuban Americans to be supporting the Republican candidates. More importantly, yes.
wait, so these are Cuban people that do not live in Cuba?
Yes, these are Cuban Americans, people who immigrated from Cuba into America, specifically after the Bay of Pigs invasion. Okay, so many oppose. So what we see here is that this has actually been, we've actually seen this in action when it comes to key states in the Republican primary, such as Florida, where Donald Trump was able to win Florida, specifically because of the older American voters, and when issue and the the reasoning here is that Donald Trump and the other Republican candidates do not support the embargo. So many voters, especially those of Cuban American descent, are more likely to vote for Republican candidates, especially Donald Trump. And this is bad because when we have Donald Trump as a primary candidate, and him winning key states like Florida, with a huge population of Cuban Americans, it shows that people are willing to have him as president. And Donald Trump getting the nomination means he can be president. And this is bad because the Donald Trump presidency would lead to more discrimination, especially anti-Islamic, Islamophobic, anti-Islamic, Islamic hate against those. Sorry, not this time. Hate towards those who are of Islamic descent, and we could see more racial violence and more misogyny in the government, especially with its discriminatory policies. And the impact of Donald Trump becoming president is dehumanization of people, as well as a lower quality of life for Americans. Okay. So third one is that of debt. Okay, so the theory, if we were to lift the embargo on Cuba, in order to restore trade, which is probably what the NAG is going to come up here and say, there would need to be loans. And Cuba has a really bad history when it comes to loans. According to U.S. News, Cuba has amounted debt over $37 billion only owed to the Paris Club of Nations, which Castro refuses to pay, and to Russia it owed over $32 billion, in which 90% of it had to be forgiven, leaving Russia at a loss of $27 billion, and over $340 million to Mexico. And what we see here is in all of these instances, Cuba has refused to pay, which has led to some countries' debt forgiveness, but in cases like the Paris Club of Nations, they still have $37 billion that needs to be paid. And the problem with this is that in Cuba, the government is the sole controller of businesses and private corporations. So if the company were to want, or investor were to want to get its money back, it probably wouldn't, as we can see through these scenarios, because the government has total control over the economy and the businesses. And what we see here is that the link here is when we end the embargo and when investors start loaning money to promote trade and business, it leads to more debt, and debt which will not be given back to the U.S. investors because Cuba has there's no pressure on the Cuban businessmen to pay it back because the Cuban government is truly the one who's in control. And we can see that is going to be there for American investors as well. It's going to hurt our economy too, and the impact of this is a lower quality of life. And overall, there's going to be money lost to American investors, which could have actually been spent on more beneficial and plans that would have paid back, such as education, jobs, and unlike in Cuba, where they have a really bad history with debt and most probably will not pay it back in this scenario. So for all these reasons, I strongly affirm today's resolution. The end of the Cuban embargo will do more harm than good.
Nice timing.
I didn't time that. I just started speaking.
How do you even do that? It's like you have a natural flow. Okay.
Yeah.
Are we doing cross stars or not?
No, God, no.
Okay. Let's not. Oh, I'm gonna talk about our contentions and I'm gonna ask you what to say. I'm good at this. I promise. Okay. Already ready? Partner? You want me to? I started timing and never moved on. Sorry, fine. So are my opponents ready? Yeah. Okay. Time starts now. I strongly negate the resolution that the end of the Cuban embargo will do more harm than good. So first, I'm going to go on case. I'm going to just address a little bit of framework, just one thing that was an issue. And then I'm going to go on to refute their contention. So just the framework issue, they forgot to provide a value criterion for a value debate. I'll just put net benefits for that. Okay, issue done. So our first contention is that of economic detriments that this Cuban embargo causes. So I understand that the other team had talked about how economically they would be unreliable, but I have facts too. I'll just state them now so then I can cross-apply. Okay. So basically, it hurts trade. Obviously, if you're gonna put an embargo on trade, you're gonna ban trade with a country, then it's gonna hurt trade. It's gonna take something away from our economy. So our first contention is economic stuff. So according to the Cuba Policy Foundation, the U.S. loses about $4.84 billion in gains annually and money. This is statistics and research, yes.
So who's behind the Cuba Policy Foundation? Are these people in Cuba? Are these people in America?
I have actually no clue. I think they're like researchers for.
Are they researchers
In Cuba.
I don't think so. If it's Cuba policy, then it should be from the U.S. because I don't. There's
Just CNN researchers in the U.S.
okay. That works. Okay. So anyway, also another statistic is that Texas A&M University says that lifting the embargo will get actually 6,000 U.S. jobs in fields in areas like agriculture and stuff. So clearly, these two statistics, the gain of $4.84 billion and the 6,000 jobs. $4.84 billion and the gain of 6,000 jobs are clearly, displayed by these studies, are clearly beneficial to our economy. But by putting this embargo in, by putting in this symbolic action, which I'm going to go a little bit over later, by putting this embargo in, we hurt our own economy and we hurt the Cuban economy. And this is obviously detrimental. Effects of these are, it's basically a cost to us for no gain. We're losing all this money, all these jobs, and it's been 50 years and the embargo hasn't really done anything to work towards democracy and stuff like that. I'll go over that later. And then also there's the issue of foreign competitors like Canada, Brazil, the European Union, taking benefits from Cuba, while the U.S. is just nope, we're not going to deal with it, so we're just going to lose benefits, while all these other countries are getting benefits. So that clearly puts the U.S. at a disadvantage in a global standpoint, yes.
How are other countries getting benefits when they're actually getting billions of dollars in debt? They're losing billions of dollars, like the Paris Club of Nations, Russia, Mexico. They're all losing billions of dollars.
According to my statistics, it's different, but sorry.
What specific advantages are they getting from Cuba?
So basically, they're getting trade in general. The fact that they didn't ban trade means that they're still getting trade. So I'm probably short on time. Anyway, our second contention is that of diplomatic ties. So in 1961, on April 17th, there's this thing called the Bay of Pigs invasion, which was launched by JFK during the Cold War, and it was basically he did internal investigations in Cuba that angered the government and almost led to a world war. So you can see how this embargo, along with already existing tensions and anger between the governments, can lead to something called war. And war is bad, especially nuclear war, which can lead to extinction. So basically, we want to avoid more tensions like this. By taking away the embargo, we not only get economic benefits, but we also get diplomatic ties that help avoid types of conflicts like these. And that's beneficial, to net benefits because you're saving lives, potentially. So our third contention is that of the embargoes themselves are ineffective. I already went over this a little bit, but it's been 50 years and they haven't done what they're supposed to do. They're symbolic action because we put them there and we're look, we're protesting against communism. When in reality, we really aren't. We aren't accomplishing anything by putting these embargoes here. And I'll go over that a little more refutations later. Also, it was established during the Cold War where the U.S. was scared of communism. We are taking that fear and we're applying it to today. We're still by putting this embargo on, it shows that we think Cuba is a threat, but in reality, today, it really isn't because, Cold War stuff, outdated, kind of. So not only that, but embargoes are supposed to hurt the government and not the people. In fact, for the whole time this embargo's been on, Cubans have been denied technology, medicine, affordable food, due to these U.S. embargoes. In fact, the American Association for World Health had a study where they saw doctors in Cuba had less than 50% of the drugs available in the world market. So that means they're not getting like any of that medicine needed to treat illnesses in Cuba, thus hurting the local population instead of the actual government. Not only that, but food shortages caused a 33% drop in caloric intake, and this was also traced to what was one of the effects of the U.S. embargo, according to the American Association for World Health Study. So as we can clearly see, we're hurting the people and not the government. So hopefully I still have time. Their first contention was that of perception and how we were supporting them. And then they also brought something like funny up. They said the human rights abuses have been increasing over the years. Over the same years that the Cuban embargo has still been in place, meaning that this Cuban embargo isn't doing anything to help help against these human rights abuses. This Cuban embargo is essentially worthless. So we're sacrificing, once again, economic benefits, diplomatic benefits for a symbolic action because it's not actually doing anything. Not only that, but there's like a Syria case study where we're like kind of already supporting. Well, actually, no, ignore that. So, like, how exactly will keeping the Cuban embargo, like, help us fight against human rights? Like, they say that taking away the Cuban embargo will, like, concede to communism and, like, all that bad stuff, or concede to human rights abuses. But in reality, like, if we take away the Cuban embargo, once again, we can actually, like, have the, oh God. Their second contention is, like, Cubans in America support embargo. They're not Cubans in Cuba, which means that they are not experiencing bad things. And they brought something about Donald Trump and how Cubans vote for him. I'm very confused. I don't understand. And that should be dropped because that doesn't make sense. Anyway, third, economically unreliable. Well, how will like keeping the Cuban embargo help them economically? How will it help them pay off these loans? People are just going to go more into debt. Okay, done.
How is it going to be economically be?
Oh, okay.
I don't understand what they were trying to say.
Embargo and effective theory that is hurting people, the government's hurting them, and it should be okay.
You know what? Write out that response for me because
They
I don't understand what
have
you're
all the
saying.
traits.
Yes, no, I got that. But just write out whatever you want me to say.
And give it to me later.
Okay. Okay. I'm gonna go over the negation team's case and the affirmative team's case. Okay. My opponents ready? Okay. As a member of the affirmative team, I strongly affirm today's resolution that the end of the Cuban embargo will do more harm than good. First on framework, yeah, okay, net benefits, we agree. Let's go on to address the negation team's case. Their first contention is about the economy. Now they tell you, first of all, that the Cuban Policy Foundation tells you that the U.S. loses could gain $4.84 billion per year. I'd like to talk about my partner's first speech, where she specifically tells you that the Cuban government has a really bad record with loans, which would be essential for us to start getting Cuba re-involved in the economy. And what we can see is that they owe over $37 billion to the Paris Club of Nations, and they've owed Russia over $32 billion. And the fact about these loans is they're just refusing to pay them back. So a lot of these countries are losing the money that they put into Cuba, and we can see that that will just continue if we end this embargo, if we allow. This is going to. Okay. But this is going to continue if the United States gives loans to Cuba. So this really is a very insignificant number compared to the billions more that we could lose in debt to Cuba. That Cuba would incur. What? Yeah, okay. Yeah, they dropped that. They didn't address that at all. They just bring up these statistics, which somehow outweigh ours, but really you can see that they don't. They also tell you that foreign competitors are taking advantage of Cuba, and the United States is getting disadvantages from not trading. They never tell you exactly what kind of advantages that they get. I asked in the POI, all they said is, yeah, we get more trade. They don't give you any numbers, they don't give you any statistics that prove that they're getting specific advantages from this trade with Cuba, that the United States is losing these advantages through the embargo. Yeah, they can't bring it up in their second speech. Let's go on to the second contention about diplomatic ties. First off here, they tell you there's really no impact to this. Like, why do we care about diplomatic ties? Should I care about them at all? You should just disregard this contention, honestly, because there's no impact to it. It doesn't weigh anything. It doesn't matter in today's round when you look at the criterion of net benefits. Yeah, okay, yeah. They also tell you that there's going to be nuclear war and extinction and tension, all resulting from this one embargo. We've had this embargo for several decades now. We haven't seen an escalation to nuclear war, to these tensions at all. Cuba doesn't have them, right? Cuba doesn't have nuclear. Stop giving me that face, Lily. Okay, anyways, there's no reason that it would escalate to nuclear war. They don't give you any specific. They don't explain their plans to you, right? Yeah. Go on to their third contention about how it's ineffective. They tell you that it's supposed to hurt the government and not the people, and that, this was established during the Cold War, and that it's really just hurting the people. They go on about that. The problem is, if Cuba had been trading with other nations like they claim, if Cuba was in this beneficial trade relationship, they should be entirely fine. Like this whole thing about how foreign competitors are trading with Cuba and they're getting advantages, that means that there would be money in the Cuban economy too. And that means that the people would be absolutely fine. There's no reason that this contention should stand. In addition, the government really controls a lot of the businesses in here. Okay. Yeah. The embargo doesn't cause this. It's really the government that causes it because they have such control over the people.
They're not allowing free trade.
Yeah, they're not allowing free trade. Let's go on to the affirmative team's case. Our first contention is about human rights. They tell you that, the Cuban embargo isn't doing anything. So as more people are speaking out because of this embargo, as they see the detrimental effects that this embargo is having on their economy, there are more people who are speaking out. And that means that more of them have to be in prison because the Cuban government wants to keep a tight hold on their people. So, yeah, that's the reason for this increase in human rights. Yeah, so clearly what still stands here is that if we end the embargo, we're going to essentially be saying to Cuba, all right, it's okay that you're committing these human rights violations. You can just continue doing that. We're not going to do anything against you anymore. Yes, that means that our impact still stands, this impact of increased dehumanization with the end of the embargo. Our second contention is about Cuban American voters. They tell you that, these Cubans are living in America. They're not experiencing all the bad things. Actually, that's false. A majority of these Cuban American voters who actually support the embargo are people who have migrated from Cuba. My partner said this in her first speech, so this reputation really doesn't stand. She said this in her first speech when you came up and asked her. Yeah, okay. Let's go on to how they talk about how they don't understand about the bad impacts of Donald Trump being president. Our point here is that Cuban Americans are actually okay. All right. First, let me explain this whole contention again. Okay. Republican candidates support the embargo. Democratic candidates do not support the embargo.
We like the Democrats better anyways.
All right. You know what? They're more likely to vote Republican because they agree with the Republican viewpoint. Now, who's going to be the Republican candidate? It's either Donald Trump or Ted Cruz, right?
For Donald Trump.
Yeah, and the thing is, we've proven to you that Cuban American voters are already supporting Donald Trump. They're going to do it again in the election because they see that he that they kind of agree with him on this issue.
But Florida.
Yeah. Okay, so these are the effects of Donald Trump being president. You increase discrimination, especially anti-Muslim sentiment. You increase racial violence and misogyny. You really increase dehumanization in the United States. So, okay, whatever. Sorry if you don't understand that. Let's go to the third contention about death. Yeah, they just kind of cross-apply their economic contention. You can't do that here. I've already told you how their measly $4.84 billion can never compare to even the $37 billion that they owe the Paris Club of Nations and never paid back, the $32 billion that they owe to Russia, but 90% had to be forgiven, so Russia lost $27 billion. So Cuba has literally refused to pay back its debt. It's literally refusing to help to pay back this debt, and that's really detrimental to these countries' economies. No. And there are really important impacts to this. If we end the embargo, that means that we're going to have economic obligations to Cuba, right? So we're going to increase our loan. Yeah, we're
generic idea.
Yeah, essentially we have to loan money to them, right? And the fact is we're never going to get that money back, and that just means that we're going to hurt our economy as a whole. Our quality of life will go down. We're going to lose a lot of jobs and money. For these reasons, I affirm.
I'm still confused.
Yeah,
Donald Trump.
Okay, so Cuban American voters are polling for like Republicans because Dems support ending. Dems don't want the Cuban embargo.
Okay,
Republicans-
why is that good?
Why am I explaining this? It's a debate round.
Just go. It's
I mean, after I explain it, okay, after you explain it, and after I explain it, and if they still don't get it,
You know what? I'm gonna go over this with my voters.
Yeah, this is confusing to me too.
I'm gonna explain what I'm hearing.
Fair enough.
Okay, so I am the second negation speaker, and our argument is that the lifting the Cuban embargo would do more good than harm. So first, we're just gonna refute their points. Sorry, we're gonna protect our points. I guess is how we can say it. So Cuba is not alone in the trait that debt is not being paid back well, and it is a tragic but worthy price to pay for the economic growth that will come with. Yeah.
Wait, is this a reputation? Like, what is this? Like,
Okay.
where does this go?
Oh, okay. So we said that it hurts trade. Then you said it has bad record with loans.
Okay.
Yes. So now we're responding by saying it's not alone in this trait of being bad at repaying loans. We are in $13 trillion in debt with China, but we are gaining a lot from the import-export relationship we have with China. Yeah, we are. If not monetarily, like there is a major impact of Chinese products in this nation. Cuba, by the way, is a major producer of sugar, and which is a valuable resource. Additionally, trading will tie into the diplomatic stuff. So the next one was that we said diplomatic issues were of great importance, and they responded with saying that telling Cuba that the human right violations are not a problem, that is the exact opposite of what we are doing. You can't have an embargo and then intervene in the human rights kind of field at the same time. So lifting the embargo would give us influence over the oppressive Cuban leaders who are being violent towards their own Cuban citizens. So we have Raul Castro, brother of Fidel Castro, is he's not as bad as his brother when it comes to harming his own citizens, but there's a group called the Damas Blanco, which is a human rights group, mostly, if not all, women dressed in white. They walk the streets and they suffer police misconduct and government, abuse and mistreatment based on their stance that they deserve to be liberated from the communist government. So us not taking a stand on the communist, we are indirectly supporting communism. We're not going to say, hey, this is bad. We're going to intervene. Additionally, and there's a diplomatic impact. And again, we're going to talk about the Trump impact. He is not a good role model, and Florida is a swing state. So it could go either way, as it often does. So, yes. So if we're going to take the embargo away, we have influence in that country because we'll be making trades with it. They'll be eager to take the money to make the trades to increase their economy, which is good because that gives us influence over them. We have more power over them. We can say we're going to withdraw the money that we're, giving you, the trades we're making if you don't treat your citizens better. But as it is, they don't care what we do because we don't have any influence because we're not making any trades, no matter what. Let's see. So their statement was that the perception's bad. So they also said that not many are supporting the lifting the embargo. That is patently false. As it was earlier stated, most Democrats, by them, they said most, if not all Democrats, support and lifting the embargo. That is about half of the nation. That's a large percentage of the nation. Additionally, many Republicans agree with lifting the embargo. Florida is one state. It has a lot of delegates in the primary, but in the general election, it doesn't matter how many delegates because that's not what the general election is based on. And so Florida is one state, and yes, it is close to Cuba, but as already stated, the older people are the ones mostly advocating for not lifting the embargo. They are older. They lived through very different times during the Cold War, for the most part, where World War III was only started by JFK in the Bay of Pigs. So that was not his finest moment. In times have changed. Times have changed. And the rules we set then have changed under a different leader, or should be adapted under a different leader. It's changing. The culture and the economic scene is changing as we speak. Additionally, they did not address the fact that 6,000 U.S. jobs will be created. If that doesn't sound like a lot of jobs, imagine that you're one of the people who's getting one of the 6,000 jobs. That is a large number in a country that's struggling with job growth as we speak. We're not going to take your question. So it is true that Cuba is not a major nuclear threat, which is actually a point for our side. We need not fear backlash when it comes to their military standing. So if we intervene diplomatically, we have diplomatic power over them. If we intervene economically, we are going to gain economic. Our economy. Sorry, I can't talk to racist. Our economy is going to vastly improve. Their economy is going to vastly improve. We're dealing with laws and standards that were set during the Cold War, which was a depressing, scary, and unprecedented time where nuclear weaponry was unregulated and a major fear. Times are changing. There's a different leader, a different president of this nation who is wonderful and eager to seek diplomacy. A fair number of Americans are going to Cuba under government-sanctioned educational trips, including my grandparents, who absolutely loved it. The people there, many of them desire liberty and liberation, and the only people that the people we are hurting by leaving this embargo and refusing to lift it are the people that would benefit, from the important exports. Thank you, and I think we answered all of them. Thank you.
Oh, I did not prep for voters. Okay, so then I'll just leave that for you.
Maybe
I did that. Okay. Everyone ready?
Yeah.
Oh, just practicing for tournaments. I'd like to lay a warm blanket of thanks over everyone in this debate today. The judge for being here and judging our debate and taking time off of their day, my opponents for being here and providing an educational debate, and my partner here for supporting me. So, so time starts now. I'm now going to go over voter issues, which are reasons why you, judge, should vote for the education team in this debate about the Cuban embargo, whether it will be lifted or not. So, I'm just going to clarify the Trump argument and what I've been hearing, and I'm very confused still. But basically, what the affirmative is trying to say in this debate is that the Cuban embargo, ending it is going to be bad. So technically, what they're trying to say is the Cuban embargo is good. So one of their arguments they had for this was that over 50% of Cuban Americans are willing to support the embargo, and they say that's good, right? Just wait until my next point. And then they say the Republicans support the Cuban embargo, and then they start saying that it's bad. And now I'm very confused because they're saying that. What? Well, Republicans, they're there for a reason. But whatever. Jeez. Okay. Don't judge. I did not say that. That should not be considered in this round. Okay. Anyway, so basically, essentially what they said is that the Cuban Americans are supporting the Cuban embargo. Yay! And then they start to say they're supporting Trump too. Oh no! So now I'm really confused about what they're trying to say. Are they trying to say that supporting the embargo is good, or is it bad? And how do Republicans directly link to basically this Cuban embargo besides the fact that they support it? Because that doesn't it doesn't make sense, and I'm expanding this point, so don't point of order me or else. Anyway, it doesn't make sense to say something is good and bad at the same time. So Daenerys is gonna murder me after this round, but okay. Now I'm gonna do a two-world comparison. So basically, they're saying that the Cuban embargo is good. For what reasons? It goes against human rights abuses. It sets like a good precedent for the United States because we're actively fighting against it somehow. Sorry, let's look at this again. Cuban Americans support it, and it's like, and if we lifted it, then then trade with Cuba will cause us to go into debt and bad things because they don't pay their loans. So that's their world. Basically, they're saying we're gonna lose money. We're gonna like be supporting human rights abuses if we lift it up. Now, what the negation team is trying to say is that with our statistics, including the 6,000 jobs, which is a very large number, yay, and the 4.84 billion, which is somehow like, I don't know what these statistics and where they come from, because no, not our statistics in general, like both of our statistics, because they contradict and that doesn't make sense. So, Judge, I urge you to vote on the impact that one of us saves lives, and that one of us is us, because we show that this embargo has been here for 50 years. It causes doctors in Cuba to not be able to get the medicine they need to help the patients. It hurts the people. It's not doing anything to the government. It's been there for 50 years and hasn't done anything. Daenerys has become the Grudge. And not only that, but Cuban citizens are denied food. They're denied technology. They're denied medicine. And what this does is hurts the lives of those Cubans. So basically, what I'm trying to say, also with the diplomatic ties, they say nuclear war isn't significant. And I'm like, what? Okay, you said diplomatic ties weren't significant. I was just twisting your words. But I'd like to say that, they say that this embargo has been there for 50 years and it hasn't caused a war. Yes. So basically, tensions will rise. As you can see, there are already previous tensions, as in the Bay of Pigs, that actually almost led to worldwide nuclear war. They say that Cuba doesn't have nukes. Maybe they do. Okay, and that's bad. And we don't want war or tensions with a country that isn't a risk to us anymore, that will give us economic benefits, according to our statistics, at least, if we basically establish ties with them, right? So essentially what the negation team is saying is that we're going to save lives. We're going to get economic benefits, despite what they said. And we're going to have diplomatic ties which ward off war. And this directly contributes to the value of this debate. This directly contributes to net benefits, which is the greatest good for most of the people. I almost defined utilitarianism, but whatever. So, wait, is it time? Is it time?
No,
wait,
no.
Wait, how much time do I have? Wait, is anyone timing me?
Okay,
that works.
Okay. Ooh, I have wallpaper. I'll figure it out. What's gonna happen is we're gonna kind of address the points of clash, which the NAG has been trying to draw as voter issues from our side, and we're gonna explain how those voter issues actually belong to the F. Alright. Time starts now. As the final speaker of the Front team, I strongly for today's resolution. The end of the Cuban embargo will do more harm than good. So let's look at the economy. So the NEG would like you to believe that once we end the Cuban embargo, we're going to be in this magical world where all the Cuban people are happy and having money and trade, and the U.S. investors are happy too. Number one, this is not going to happen, and it's not true. So let's go over the evidence again and explain this. So what we see is currently the Cuban government has this huge accumulation of debt, and just for the European nation, that's over $39 billion. Russia had to forgive 90% of the debt, and Russia lost $27 billion. Mexico actually loaned over $395 million. And what we've seen is in all these instances, the Cuban government has refused, practically straight out said, no, they're not going to pay off this money. Now, what does this mean for U.S. investors? Now, one of the outcomes that the NEG is trying to bring up is, we're going to have more trade, U.S. investors are going to invest, make money. That's not going to happen, because when U.S. investors come and invest, they're going to lose their money, because under the policies of the Cuban government, no money can be made. Cuban government, they have this huge control over economic policies that are actually really detrimental to its economy and its people. And we've seen that the Cuban government has practically refused to have a free market, which kind of explains why the Cuban people are still suffering today. Because as Annette pointed out, that Cuba is trading with the European nations. In theory, they should be fine then. If they have other trade partners, they should be fine and doing well. But what we see here is that because of the economic policies of the Cuban government, the Cuban people are suffering. It's not the embargo, it's the bad economic policies of the government, and which the U.S. is going to have to deal with if they try to invest, and then we're going to lose more money. And moreover, so the so-called jobs they want to bring to the U.S., well, the money invested in Cuba, the millions or possibly billions of dollars, could be invested right back in the U.S. and contribute to more education, jobs. This can be done without having to go through Cuba. We can just do it directly here, which would probably work out better. Going on, they talked about diplomatic ties and how it's important. Okay, so in the first speech they talked about nuclear war, and how we're gonna have extinction. But in the next speech, they say there's no military threat from Cuba. This is a complete contradiction, because first they're saying we're going to be expecting nuclear war from the Cubans, and now they're saying there's no military threat and we shouldn't have to fear working with Cuba. Please make up your mind, but it's too late now.
Wow.
Sorry. All right. Yeah, so we see this is a complete contradiction. The NAG hasn't clarified what stance they side on, so let's assume they're going for the extinction, which is what the first and third speaker said. Okay, Cuba has had this embargo for the past 50 years. There's never been any serious threat prior to, other than the Bay of Pigs invasion, which I think was kind of before the embargo, or in that midst of transition from the embargo. So that was from the very beginning. What we see is in this past 50 years, there hasn't been any nuclear threat or military threat from Cuba. So no, we're not going to die, or there's not going to be no extinction. Yeah, and it's oh yeah. Oh, it's a Cuban missile. Okay, whatever. Third, the human rights abuses. So according to the NEG, the embargo is in practice practically, it hasn't really, the embargo does not really do anything for the human rights abuses. Okay. That doesn't mean we should just go along and put our economic and monetary beliefs or monetary, outcomes over human rights abuses. Because the fact is, whether we think so or not, there is going to be this perception that the U.S. is supporting what Cuba actively does. And that includes its human rights abuses. They talk about how these companies could have some hold over Cuba. Okay, here's a difference between America and Cuba. In Cuba, the companies are controlled by the government. In America, not necessarily so. So for the companies, they're not really going to be inclined to speak about human rights abuses because, one, they're not the government. It's not the U.S. government doing this. It's American companies. And it's probably going to be even worse for people because if they bring businesses and jobs over there, there's probably going to be more exploitation of workers because, again, they're really bad when it comes to human rights and human rights in general. So what we see here is when we're looking at the impacts of the surround, we see that the vote offers clearly the impacts of a lowering economy for Americans as well as the human rights abuses that will be continued and a perceptual vision, and this will be an overall net benefit compared to the net case. So for all these reasons, I strongly affirm today's resolution. Okay.
All right. Who knows their Cold War history?
Yeah.
I knew it once, but then I forgot.
When was the embargo put in place?
1959.
Wrong.
No, because 1961 was the Day of Pigs.
Yes. Was the embargo